This week, we're going to be studying evolution. And the two labs that you did right before the lab midterm, the ones about DNA and the ones about genetics, they really set you up to understand the concept of evolution. Um, this picture here is a picture of a praying mantis. The praying mantis is a predator in your garden, but it's a predator for little bugs. Um, the praying mantis is also food for birds. So the praying mantis has got two jobs that it needs to do with its appearance. It needs to be a dangerous predator for little bugs, but it also needs to be able to hide from the birds that would want to eat it. And this guy you might find in your garden. He looks quite a bit like a fat green twig. And when he hangs out on the leaves of a plant, he kind of jiggles a little bit. And that's not because he's nervous, it's his way of looking like a piece of a plant. Let me show you a couple of his relatives. These guys, okay? Here we've got, here we've got three of the closely related insects to a praying mantis. Let's start with this guy here. This guy here, you can see this part of his body, that's the thorax part of the body, is wide and much bigger and shinier than the praying mantis in our garden. And this part of his body is also wider and has got veins in it that make it look like the veins in a leaf on the plant. He'd be really good at hiding on a green plant. His cousin over here, not very good at hiding on a green plant. His cousin looks like a dead leaf, and that's where this particular mantid hangs out. And so he's got the same body parts, but they're brown and look like a dead leaf. Look at this guy here. He's really hard to even see. So this is the abdomen, that's the thorax, and that's the head of this guy. Here is the abdomen, here is the thorax, and here is the head of that guy. Here's one of his little praying mantis arms. Here's the other little praying mantis arm. You can hardly see him. Now, how did this happen? Well, this happened because of genetic mutation, which generated new alleles at different gene sites, and then the action of natural selection. For example, let's focus on this guy over here. Let's imagine that his great grandfather looked exactly like this little guy, okay? But at some point, his great grandfather, there was a gene mutation in him that made the color of his exoskeleton not bright green, but probably a dull green brown. Okay, maybe not this color, but duller. And so he and all of his, this guy here and all of his ancestors, they were hanging out on dead and dying leaves. So birds were less likely to see them than to see their bright green cousins. So these guys are the ones that were slightly brown, maybe less brown than this. They were just a little more likely to be able to reproduce. And so this allele that caused this slightly brown color became a little more abundant in the environment. And so the allelic frequency of the brown trait became more common, and natural selection continues to act, right? This one would be a very long discussion from my point of view. This one's easier to understand, right? Imagine if this guy here, if his son had an allele that just made this part of his body a little bit fatter, and then that allele was slightly more advantageous. They're just a little less likely to get eaten by a bird, a little more likely to reproduce, then that allele would become more abundant in the population. Here's just a couple more leaf insects because I think they're so fascinating. You would totally think this was a leaf. Was a leaf. There's no way you would pick that out for an insect unless you knew what you were looking for. Look at how he's got little brown edges, little wrinkly brown edges. Not a leaf, that's an insect. And here, this is a moth, and it looks totally like a dead leaf. If we turn him over, you can see there's his little mothy head with his little mothy antennas and his little mothy legs. Totally looks like a dead leaf. More, his great 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 grandfather probably didn't, but whatever allele it was that created more of this appearance, it became more common in the population. Now, this idea, let's go back here. This idea is very similar to the one that you did with the symbio on pigs. That was just the week right before the midterm. And if you didn't go all the way to the part where the pigs were being attacked by wolves, then definitely you should do that, because that is already showing you the idea of allelic frequencies and natural selection. Imagine if the brown pigs could hide in the forest because the forest floors like got dead brown leaves on it and stuff like that. And then the black pigs and the red pigs just stand out a little bit more. Then when there are wolves around, brown pigs are a little less likely to get eaten. So the alleles creating brown coat color become more abundant in the population, and we end up getting more and more brown pigs in our population. Now, what I've been describing is often known as the modern synthesis of the theory of evolution, but now it really just is evolution. Like we've given up whatever was the non-modern synthesis. So basically, here's a description of evolution. Mutation can cause new alleles in a population. You know what an allele is, right? An allele is a variation of a gene. So in our pigs, there were alleles that did black and brown and red. Those were three different alleles. Probably the ancestral pigs were all brown, and then there was a mutation that caused black and a mutation that caused red. Okay, so mutation can cause new alleles in a population. Then it's natural selection that will change the percentage of alleles in a population. So when there was an allele that made a praying mantis look a little bit more like the leaves it hangs out on, whatever that new allele was, it is selected for by natural selection. Okay, all right. So before we go any farther, let me remind you about scientific theories. Scientists do not use the word theory the way regular folks use the word theory. A theory is an explanation of why something happens. Let's go away. Of why something happens. That's a theory. It explains why something happens. And something doesn't get to be a theory unless it started out as many hypotheses, and all of the experiments that have been done on all of those hypotheses have all supported this particular explanation. So we call evolution the theory of evolution, and it is, that word is not meant to imply that we are in any way uncertain. As a matter of fact, we probably are as sure about the theory of evolution as we are about the theory of relativity. We have tested it so many times. With the theory of evolution, every time some new well, let me back up. The theory of evolution happened before anyone knew what the nucleus was for in a cell, before they knew about DNA, before they knew about genes and ancestry. The people who came up with the theory of evolution knew much, much less about biology than you know at this point in the class. And what is remarkable is every time we have a new discovery, like, oh, here's this stuff, DNA. Oh, here's this stuff called genes. Oh, we can figure out what proteins they make. All of that. Every time there's been a new discovery, we've used that information to challenge the theory of evolution, and it has always more than substantiated what I've just been explaining. So pretty remarkable. Now, Darwin's paper was on the origin of species by means of natural selection. And this term, natural selection, and the concept behind it is still foundational to our understanding of evolution. It's just Darwin knew nothing about DNA or genes, nothing. I don't know how he came up with this idea without knowing that, but he did. Now, Darwin argued that contemporary species arose from ancestors. So he would have looked at all of those praying mantises that I showed you and said, okay, this one that I see in my garden, that's going to be the ancestors. And these other guys that live in different areas, they arose by a mechanism that he named natural selection. Before we go further, let me define for you Darwinian fitness. When humans talk about survival of the fittest, we have a very parochial understanding of what that means. We think it means you're beautiful and rich and strong and you live forever. Okay, that is not Darwinian fitness. Darwinian fitness does not care at all about how healthy you are. It does not care at all about how long you live. In terms of Darwinian fitness, it's not the longest lived animal that is the fittest. It's not the strongest, it's not the smartest, and it's definitely not the most beautiful. In Darwinian fitness, it only measures reproductive success. Who has the most offspring that survive to reproduce themselves? In other words, if you had two different married couples, okay? One married couple was gorgeous and rich and brilliant, and that couple is going to live until they're 80. But that couple is going to have a single son, and that son is also going to be rich and long-lived and whatever, and also have a single son. Then we've got another couple, and this couple is going to have 4 kids before they turn 30. And by the time they're 30, their first kid is 16. They started young and will take care of her brothers and sisters. And those people, they were ugly and stupid and they died young. They died at 35, okay? Well, in terms of Darwinian fitness, it's the people who died at 35, because Darwinian fitness only cares about reproductive success. One of the things that you will hear me say one day is that there are like diseases that happen in people my age or people your parents' age. And you might wonder, well, if evolution works, then why do people get high blood pressure when they're in their 50s? Or why do people get cancer? And the truth is, natural selection powers evolution, and natural selection simply does not care what happens to you when you're in your 60s or your 50s. Because by that point, you've had your kids, you've raised your kids, so evolution's done with you. Evolution does not care if you burst into a ball of flame at 55 and disappear. It only cares about reproductive success. All right, we're going to start here at the beginning of our next video.